What if the legacy you leave behind isn't just built by your hands, but shaped by your words? What if a single sentence spoken in frustration echoes longer than years of good intentions? And what if the greatest test of fatherhood isn't authority, but wisdom in the heat of the moment? Welcome to a reflection that goes beyond parenting tips or discipline strategies. This is about something deeper, the kind of man you become when your children look to you for guidance, not just rules. It's about understanding that your voice carries weight far beyond today's arguments. Your tone, your timing, your choice of words, they don't just correct a child's behavior, they shape a future adult's heart. In this message, we'll explore the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy through the lens of parenting, revealing 7 things intelligent parents never say and what they say instead. If you've walked the long road of raising children, then you already understand. Fatherhood tests a man like little else. The sleepless nights, the endless questions, the moments when patience runs dry. And sometimes, in those moments, we say things we don't mean. A sharp tone, a careless phrase. Words we assume will pass like a breeze through leaves. But the truth? Words linger. The older we get, the more we understand. Words are never just words. They settle deep. They leave impressions. Sometimes they scar. As Marcus Aurelius so wisely said, "What we do now echoes in eternity." And for fathers, perhaps nothing echoes longer or louder than the words we speak to our children. Every sentence we utter has the power to either fortify a child's spirit or fracture it. Our words can become a shield that protects them in the harsh moments of life, or they can become a wound that takes years to heal. An intelligent parent understands this truth. He knows language isn't just a means of communication, it's a tool of formation. It shapes the child in front of him and the adult that child will one day become. A careless word can harden the heart. A wise one? It can prepare that heart for the world. Today we explore the 7 things intelligent parents never say, and more importantly, the words they choose instead. Because the legacy we leave isn't just carved in what we do, it's spoken in what we say and how we say it. Let's begin with the first phrase many of us have fallen back on, "Because I said so." I'll be honest with you, there were countless evenings in my years as a father when I was tempted to fall back on this line. After a long day, when your back aches and your patience wears thin, it feels like the easiest way to put an end to the debate. And in the moment it works. It gives you silence, it gives you control. But with time and reflection you begin to see what it actually costs. Because I said so is a phrase intelligent parents learn to leave behind. Not because they've gone soft, not because they're afraid to be the authority in the home, but because over time we come to understand something far more powerful. When we give commands without explanation, we might win the moment, but we lose the lesson. And Stoicism teaches us, we don't live for the moment, we live for the legacy. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, what we do now echoes in eternity. And nothing echoes more persistently than the phrases we use when we are tired, overwhelmed, and at the end of our rope. Psychologists have long understood that when a child's question is shut down with a command, we're not just ending a conversation. We're closing a door in their development. We teach them not to think, not to question, not to reason. But Stoic parents, intelligent parents, know this. Reason is the seed of character. If we want our children to one day guide themselves with wisdom, then we must teach them why we make the choices we do. I found that when I take even a moment to explain my reasoning, I open a door much greater than obedience. I open a door to understanding. Instead of simply saying you can't take the car out tonight, I explain that nighttime driving brings greater risks. that she has responsibilities in the morning that require her energy and focus. And slowly something shifts. The arguments fade. The resistance softens because she doesn't just follow my rule, she begins to understand it, and eventually she begins to adopt the same judgment. And isn't that what we hope for? Not to raise rule followers but wise decision makers. A Stoic father doesn't bark orders. He leads. He leads with clarity, with thoughtfulness, with patience. He knows that reason is the foundation of self-control. Because I said so might silence the noise temporarily, but it leaves the lesson incomplete. And a man who's walked far enough along the path of fatherhood knows what we leave unfinished in our children will echo long after we're gone. So instead, we speak to teach. We lead to guide, not for compliance, but for growth. Because in the end, the goal isn't obedience, it's wisdom. Now that we've seen how a simple shift in language can build or break a child's reasoning, we turn to the next phrase that Stoic, intelligent parents know to avoid. Let's move forward. Previously, we reflected on how a simple phrase, "because I said so," might seem harmless, even convenient in the moment, but ultimately fails to teach the wisdom and reasoning that Stoic fatherhood demands. We saw how choosing explanation over command builds not only obedience but understanding. That shift opens a path, not to dominance but to legacy. Today, we move deeper, because sometimes it isn't what we command that wounds, but what we label. I once said something I'll always regret. It wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel on the surface, but it had sharp edges, and it cut deeper than I realized. "You never do anything right." I can still hear it. And worse, I can still see the effect it had on my son. That's the thing about words like that. They don't fix behavior, they don't guide, they brand. No matter how tough a father thinks he's being in that moment, how justified, how fed up, those words carve deep. They don't just correct a mistake, they tattoo a belief. And once a child begins to believe he is always wrong, he starts to live like it. Stoicism teaches us to lead with reason and discipline, not with frustration. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, "Be strict with yourself and tolerant with others." On that day, I had failed at both. Modern psychologists echo what Stoics knew centuries ago. When we shame instead of guide, we take a moment that could have been about growth and turn it into a wound, a bruise to the heart that may never fully fade. I saw it firsthand. After that day, my son David hesitated every time I asked for help. Even when it was something I knew he was good at, he second-guessed himself. He looked to me not for guidance, but for approval. And often he expected disapproval. I had made one careless comment, and for a time it shaped how he saw himself. But here's the grace of Stoic philosophy. It reminds us that we are not trapped by our past mistakes, that we can correct the course, not just for our children, but for ourselves. So I made it my mission to rebuild what I had broken. Slowly, intentionally, I started inviting David back into those kinds of projects. I didn't just hand him tools, I showed him how to use them. I didn't just tell him what to do, I stood beside him as he learned. And when he struggled, I praised his effort, not just the outcome. At first, his shoulders were still heavy, but little by little he stood taller. He made eye contact, he asked questions. He trusted his own hands again. And I learned too. An intelligent parent separates the child from the behavior. We correct the mistake, not the person. Because a bent nail doesn't mean a broken structure, and a child who's allowed to fail with dignity becomes an adult who rises with grace. That's the Stoic way. Not to wound with words, but to guide with wisdom. And when we get it wrong, and we will, we start by correcting ourselves. Then we lead again. Quietly. Steadily. With reason. Another pitfall: comparison. If you've been a parent long enough, especially a father, you've likely caught yourself saying something like, "You're just like your uncle," or "That's exactly what your brother does." It slips out, often in frustration. It feels in the moment like a simple observation. But for the child hearing it, it's more than that. Maybe your son pushed one too many boundaries. Maybe your daughter rolled her eyes, and you thought of someone else who did the same thing. But when you make that comparison, especially to someone you don't hold in high regard, you're doing more than reacting. You're branding them. And that brand sticks, because the truth is, once a child begins to believe they are nothing more than a copy of someone else's flaws, they start to live like it. They start acting out the identity you've assigned them. That's why Stoicism doesn't just caution us against anger. It teaches us to master our perceptions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In other words, rise above. Don't echo what wounded you. And that's what intelligent fathers do. They see each child for who they are, not who they remind us of. Children are not shadows of other people's pasts. They are individuals, still, shaping their identity. If we are to guide them wisely, we must speak to who they are, not who we fear they might become. Psychologists have confirmed what Stoics always believed. Comparison doesn't inspire change. It breeds resentment. It corrodes self-worth. It plants the seed of shame. Over time, repeated comparisons create competition where there should be unity. Or worse, they cause children to stop trying. Because why bother if the outcome is already predicted? Why strive if your identity has already been assigned? I've watched it happen. Children slowly stepping back from who they could be, shrinking, under the pressure of living up to or escaping from someone else's legacy. But Stoic fathers take a different path. We begin with self-mastery. We notice the urge to compare and we pause. We ask, what does this child truly need to thrive? What strength do I see that I can nurture? What fear can I help ease? Instead of saying, "You're acting just like your cousin," we say, "I know this isn't like you. What's really going on?" Instead of boxing them in, we give them space to grow. We don't shame, we guide, we don't compare, we connect. Because intelligent parenting, Stoic parenting, is about seeing the whole child. It's about nurturing who they are, not who we wish they'd be. And now, having reflected on how identity can be either crushed or cultivated by our words, we're ready to explore the next principle intelligent parents live by. Let's move forward. In the last section, we saw how comparison can wound a child's identity, turning a teachable moment into a silent burden. We explored how intelligent, Stoic parenting speaks to the child in front of us, not to the memory of someone else. Now we continue our journey deeper into the Stoic father's role, to resist the urgency of distraction and the illusion of more time, and to be fully present in the moments that truly matter. When a child starts to believe they've been boxed in, when they feel that a parent has already decided who they are or what they'll never become, that belief doesn't fade easily. It calcifies. It settles into their bones. That's why the Stoic father begins every act of parenting with self-mastery. He holds back the easy judgments, the quick comparisons. He pauses and asks, what does this child need to grow into his own skin? How can I guide her toward becoming who she is meant to be, not who I wish she was? Because parenting isn't about shaping a child in our image. It's about helping them uncover their own. We learn to resist the shortcuts, to stop comparing them to someone else's successes or failures. Instead, we nurture their character. We see not just the surface behaviors, but the deeper traits waiting to be strengthened. Kindness, curiosity, courage. That's what the Stoic path is about. It's not judgment, it's clarity. It's about seeing things as they are, not as we wish they were, not as they used to be, but as they are in this moment. And then working with them, patiently, steadily, with wisdom. And when it comes to parenting, it means seeing our children as individuals, not as echoes of someone else. This is intelligent parenting. This is leadership by example, and it lasts. Now let's talk about another phrase, one that seems small but speaks volumes. I don't have time right now. If you've lived on this earth long enough, maybe past 45, maybe past 50, you've probably come to know one unshakable truth. Time is the one thing you don't get back. In our younger years, we believe there's plenty of it. Time to get it right. Time to be more present. Time to fix what's broken. But the truth is, time doesn't come with a pause button, and often the ones who needed us most were the ones who noticed our absence. There's an old friend of mine, Sam. He was a hard-working man, built his business from scratch, provided well, but his understanding of love was filtered through the lens of provision. To him, love meant hours at the office, missed dinners, working weekends. Whenever his daughter asked him to play catch in the yard, or his son wanted him to attend a school play, he would sigh and say, I don't have time right now. And in his mind, he didn't. There were deals to close, targets to meet, clients to impress. He kept promising himself, later. But later never came. His children grew up. They moved away, and one day at his retirement party, he looked around at a room full of colleagues and realized the people he had worked so hard for weren't there. I remember him telling me, eyes glassy with regret, I was always too busy for 5 minutes. Now I've got all the time in the world, but they're too busy for me. That sentence, it's heavy. It sits in the chest like stone. The Stoics never underestimated the value of time. Seneca said, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. We waste it telling ourselves that we'll be more present tomorrow, that someday a more patient version of ourselves will show up. But Stoic parents, intelligent parents, know better. They know that tomorrow is not guaranteed, that now is the only time we own. And here's the truth. Children know instinctively. They don't remember the toys we bought. They remember the moments we gave, the conversations where we really listened, the times we looked up from our phones, turned from our desks, and gave them our full attention. Presence is not about elaborate plans. It's not about expensive vacations or grand events. It's the 5 minutes that mean the world to a child. 5 minutes to listen, to laugh, to ask how they're doing, and actually wait for the answer. If we're not careful, we'll find ourselves with all the time in the world, and no one left to share it with. So we put the phone down. We step away from the task. We make the time. Not because it's convenient, but because it's necessary. That's Stoic parenting. That's living aligned with what matters, and it makes all the difference. Next, we arrive at a cousin of the comparison trap. The phrase, you should be more like. Research shows that when children are constantly compared to others, it damages more than just their mood. It strikes their identity. Those who hear this phrase too often are more likely to grow into adults with chronic self-doubt and low self-esteem. It doesn't fade in a day. These are beliefs that settle deep, and those of us who've spent years trying to unlearn the things said to us in childhood, we know just how long that journey can be. As fathers, we all face it. We see a gap. Maybe our child struggles in an area where another kid thrives, a cousin with perfect grades, a neighbor's star athlete child, and we feel the urge to point it out. If only you were more like her. It's tempting. It feels like motivation. But it doesn't uplift. It diminishes. It tells the child, who you are isn't enough. No child can bloom in someone else's shadow. The Stoics taught us, look inward. Marcus Aurelius never advised comparing yourself to another man. He ill-advised self-reflection, accountability, personal excellence. And that's the heart of Stoic fatherhood, helping your child grow into their best self, not a replica of someone else. So instead of saying you should be more like your cousin, we say let's talk about what you love. What strengths do you want to build? Because our role as fathers isn't to create copies, it's to cultivate character. And with that we turn the page to our next reflection, how to deal with disobedience not with control, but with calm strength. Previously, we explored how comparisons, no matter how well-intentioned, can quietly corrode a child's self-worth. We looked at how even subtle suggestions to be more like someone else don't motivate, they diminish. Now we continue with an even deeper truth that the language we use, especially when disappointed, has the power to shape a child's identity, for better or for worse. When a father says, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" or "You should be more like your cousin," it rarely inspires a child to rise. What they hear instead is this: "You've already fallen short," and they hear that clearly. It may not show up in their face or in their posture right away, but inside, the words settle. They begin to believe they're not enough. Over time, these comparisons don't just create resentment toward the sibling or peer being praised. They spark a quiet resentment toward themselves, a corrosion of individuality. I've witnessed this play out up close. There were two brothers I knew growing up. One was the golden boy, athletic, academic, the pride of every parent-teacher meeting. The other, constantly in his shadow. Every report card was a battle. Every achievement was weighed against the older brother's success. No one meant harm, but the scales were never equal, and the younger brother spent his childhood not striving for his best, but trying to outrun someone else's finish line. Eventually, exhausted and defeated, he stopped trying at all. The intelligent parent learns. They stop looking at their child through the lens of what could be if they were someone else. They begin to truly see the child in front of them, not as a reflection of expectations, but as a unique soul with a path no one else can walk. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." But here's the key. Those trials must be their own, not someone else's. Not borrowed comparisons, not the weight of another person's success strapped across their back. Our children are not projects. They are people. They're mysterious, evolving, and often surprising. Intelligent parenting is about trusting that process. It's about resisting the urge to sculpt them into replicas, and instead, guiding them to unfold into themselves. That's where real potential lies, not in imitation but in authenticity. And that, my friend, is the Stoic way. Now let's examine a phrase even more dangerous for the long-term health of a child's spirit. I'm disappointed in you. Few words carry more emotional weight, and few are spoken with less awareness of their long-term cost. At first glance, it sounds righteous, reasonable, a parent expressing values. But if you've stood on both sides of that sentence, as the speaker and the one being spoken to, you already know it doesn't just express concern, it brands. Years ago, I watched it happen. A man I deeply respected, a hard-working father, of 3, quiet and disciplined, was confronted with a mistake his son made. It wasn't catastrophic. It didn't end anyone's world, but it shook the family. And in his exhaustion, that father sat his son down and said softly, "I'm disappointed in you." He meant to call him back to the right path, but what his son heard was, "You've lost my approval." That moment followed the boy for years. Even as a grown man, he spoke of it like it had just happened. Not because he thought he'd been unfairly corrected, but because he felt his father had passed judgment, not on the action, but on him. That is a wound that sits in silence and grows. The intelligent father learns to separate the deed from the person. Stoic philosophy gives us the blueprint. Marcus Aurelius didn't spend his life brooding over human failure. He corrected where he could, taught where he must, and led through example. Seneca once wrote, "A good character once established is not easily overthrown, but that character must be cultivated, with patience, with clarity, not crushed under disappointment." When we say, "I'm disappointed in you," we risk tying our child's worth to our approval. We transform a single mistake into a reflection of their entire identity. And when that happens, when the child feels their very being has been called into question, they stop listening to the lesson and start carrying the shame. A Stoic father understands the subtle difference that makes all the difference. He says, "What you did wasn't right," not "you are wrong." He teaches accountability, not shame. He makes correction firm but leaves dignity intact. Because we know, having lived through our own mistakes, that we grow best when we are corrected with clarity, not condemned with judgment. And our children, they are no different. If you want to raise a son or daughter who can carry life's weight, who can face storms with their head held high, you must give them both structure and space. Hold them accountable, yes, but never at the cost of their sense of self-worth. They need to know even when they fall, they are still loved, still respected, still believed in. Because that belief, that's what gives them the courage to rise again. Intelligent parenting isn't about perfection, it's about wisdom in the heat of the moment. It's about choosing your words with intention, especially when you're tired, frustrated, or hurt. Because your child will remember what you said the day they stumbled, and that memory will either be the hand that helps them up or the weight that keeps them down. A Stoic father chooses carefully, not out of weakness, but from strength, from reason, from compassion, from love. And that's what builds legacy. We're not just raising children to obey. We're shaping future men and women who must one day guide themselves when we're no longer there. And they will carry either the weight or the wisdom of the words we spoke. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, what we do now echoes in eternity. And what we say, especially when we're tested, matters even more. Fatherhood is not measured in the loud moments, but in the quiet choices we make day after day. It's not in the rules we enforce, but in the wisdom we embody. The Stoic father isn't perfect. He's present. He's mindful of the words he speaks and the tone he uses. He leads with calm strength, not control, because he knows he's not just raising children to obey. He's raising future men and women who will one day navigate life on their own. And that's the heart of legacy. It isn't built in grand gestures. It's forged in the way we listen when we're tired, the way we guide when we're frustrated, and the way we speak when it would be easier to shout or walk away. Our children will carry those moments with them, and long after we're gone, they will echo, not just what we taught, but how we lived. So choose wisdom, choose reason, choose compassion, not for perfection, but for impact. Because what we do now and what we say now truly does echo in eternity. So if you're ready to speak with intention, calm, and clarity, write in the comments, "I choose wisdom." Because the legacy we leave is not made of dramatic speeches or perfect outcomes. It is built in the quiet words, the calm moments, the small daily choices. It is built through strength, tempered by compassion. That is the Stoic way, and it is a legacy worth leaving.